Good afternoon, everybody. Uh, this video is going to take you through your evidence chart. Now, often you'll hear me refer to artifact chart, evidence chart. I kind of use those terms interchangeably. I think they're actually called an evidence chart. But edTPA, when you submit an edTPA, you submit two things. You submit you submit actually like 15, 17 things, but two types of things. You submit artifacts and commentaries. That's what you submit. There's three commentaries and there's a context for learning, which kind of is like the commentary. Those you do on templates and their Word documents. Um, and then you've got your artifacts. And your artifacts would be things that you create to offer the evidence that you need. And that's why sometimes you'll hear me call it evidence instead of artifacts. So everybody needs to make sure that they're looking at their own handbook. And so I'm going to be looking at several handbooks today, but in your handbook, way in the back, which is unfortunate. If I had made this, I might have put this in the front. It's so important. But here you go. It's usually around page, as you can see, this is on page 41. Some of the handbooks I've seen, it's on, page 44 or 45. But this is, for example, for elementary math, this is the evidence chart. And it explains here that you're going to be submitting commentaries and artifacts. And this chart, so you've got, two types of evidence, artifacts and commentary. And then this chart tells you about what all you're going to submit. Now, for instance, it says here, Part A, be Task 1, Part A, Context for Learning. And there's a template provided. Don't use the one that's in your handbook. That's not a template. That just shows you what's on the template. Your either if you're unaffiliated, you need to get that from edTPA once you register. But if you're affiliated with a school, then you need to get those templates and handbooks and things from your school. I always have my students, once they've created that, to save it as a PDF. But any of these are acceptable file types. There's you have to submit it. We know that because the minimum is 1, and you can only submit 1, so you can't submit 2 contexts for learning. And that's because you're not going to do this with 2 different sets of children. You're just going to do it with 1 set. It tells you the page numbers, and it tells you that there is some additional information. You have to use 11-point type Arial, 11-point type font, and you must maintain the margins. Lesson planning for the learning segment, notice that it is 1 file. So even though you're writing 3 to 5 lesson plans, those are all going to go on 1 file. Now, sometimes students get confused between what's a file and what's a folder. A folder is full of files. A file would be the one thing that's got a DOC or a PDF at the end. So that's what a file is. These are file types. There should be one of them. That means that you need to copy and paste all of your lesson plans onto 1 document. Okay? It gives you some more information there that you need to make sure you check out. So that's the math one. They're all pretty similar. Here's the special ed one. Instructional materials. I have an entire video on Task 1 Part C instructional materials. You'll find that in my Task 1 playlist. And then you've got Part D assessments. Now, SPED does a little something different. They add data collection procedures in there. But again, all of your information is there. And then, of course, you've got your planning commentary. And there's a template provided. When there's a template provided, you're looking for a Word document. So here's the secondary ed math. We've already talked about the artifacts and commentary specifications for task 1. Again, you need to be opening up your own handbook and looking at it. All the directions for your test are in the handbook. You need to be looking at that. We have task 2, artifacts and commentary. So I wish to goodness this weren't this way, but it is. Everybody's got a little something different for video clips. So if you're secondary ed math, you can have only one video clip or you can have 2. But when you put all of your clip 1 and clip 2 together, it can be no more than 15 minutes total. And neither of the clips can be less than 3 minutes. So sit and think about that in a minute. You'll figure out what it means. You have to obtain permission, of course, before you video clip, but you're not required to submit those permission slips to Pearson. There is an instruction commentary, and the template is provided. This is the library specialist artifact chart. Theirs is different. For example, they're supposed to submit 2 clips. So the minimum of 2 and a maximum of 2. And they don't want any clip to be more than 10 minutes each. So that's kind of different than some of the others you might see. Here's the early childhood evidence chart. They have 2 clips. You must submit 2 clips. But what they go by is that no more than 15 minutes total when you combine the minutes. See what I mean? So when people ask me how many clips and how long, I really can't give you any answer besides look at your evidence chart. And there you've got it. It's in the back of your handbook. All right, here is the K-12 Performing Arts. Theirs is like the library specialist. School librarian. That's what I meant to say. Now, physical education, they've got, you have to have at least 1, no more than 2, and they've got these special things in it about focus students. So you have to select 3 focus students, and you have to make sure that when you choose your footage that you are picking those focus students. Now, that's not in like K-5. That's not in everybody's handbook. Again, you have to look at your own handbook. So let's talk about Task 3 evidence. So Task 3 evidence, Part A is work samples. And everybody has to submit 3 work samples. Now, the work samples might be written, or they might be audio, or they might be video. And there's some rules about those that you need to be aware of. If you use written work samples, you've got to follow this information here about using correction fluid or tape or something to hide the students' names. And then you'll write on there student A, student B, or student 1, student 2, whatever. And then there's rules about the audio, no more than 5 minutes per focus student. Now, in some of your content areas, you choose the focus students before you do task 3. That would be, for example, how it would be with, some of the ones where you're going to be recording them individually. But for many of the content handbooks, you don't choose your focus students until after you've analyzed your assessment. So again, refer to your handbook. So there a lot of stuff here that you need to read about the audio and the video work samples. And then you've got evidence of feedback. So you need to make sure that you either have the feedback that's included on written work. So like for instance, if you have a math assignment that the students did, and you wrote feedback on that, then you can submit that. You can just keep that feedback on your work samples, and you don't have to do feedback files. So that's why it says 0, because if you don't have, if you didn't make extra feedback files, then you don't have to submit them. But you need to have feedback on something, because otherwise you're not going to get a very good score on rubric 12. So take a look at that. Again, feedback can be audio or visual. You might want to do audio or visual if, for example, your students are very young and couldn't read written feedback. You would want to give feedback that is developmentally appropriate. That's very important, because you could get a automatic score of a 1 if you have feedback that's not developmentally appropriate. Going on, let's take a look at another one. Oh, that's not different. So here we've got assessment commentary. Again, that's a commentary is part of the evidence. It's not an artifact. It's what you write. There is a template that's provided. And here's the very last one. And I swear to goodness, you'd be surprised the number of people who forget this. So one of the things I have my students do is I have them create the assessment they're going to use for task 3, and immediately they have to create the evaluation criteria. Now, if you don't know what evaluation criteria is, I do have a video on that as well, and I think you'll find it. I think it's in both the Task 1 playlist and the Task 3 playlist. But basically, you need to have something like a rubric or a checklist that gives the criteria that you're using in order to make the determination. The assessment that you choose is inserted at the end of the commentary. It tells you that right here. Another thing, there are some file size requirements. So you want to make sure that, for instance, when you're using these video files, you might need to compress them. You probably will need to compress your videos for your instruction commentary. But those that compression needs to be within this size right there. So that is all about your evidence chart, which remember are artifacts and commentaries. You need to look at your handbook and become familiar with yours, because it's got a lot of the stuff in there that you need to know. I hope you have a great day.